All right, let's get over to the lesson because it is going to take me a hot minute. Keep in mind that I will be looking for questions as we go throughout this. So please put your questions in there, and my team is looking to take the questions that are relevant to today and putting them in the chat. We'll take care of them at the end. All right, here we go. So the question, are you insulin resistant? These patients are what they look like to me, which is they have this inflammatory response to them. And what we're trying to figure out is they come to me, they come to the channel, they come to the clinic trying to reverse the problem. And it's not an accident that they come. They should. When you look at the problems that insulin resistance causes, these are the mortality rates for, I think it's 2020 or 2022. And when you look at the amount of diseases that are, taking the lives of people, I don't think anybody should be shocked to see that the only one that is not linked to insulin resistance is car accidents. Every other one of these diseases is because of the grime and debris that's happening from the chronic production of insulin. The insulin got so high, and there was so high for so long that your cells stopped listening. So let's back away from the edge for a second and say, how do I diagnose insulin resistance? What are the steps I look for? And I'm going to let you guys say, yeah, even you guys could diagnose insulin resistance based on a couple of these. They're easy. You can see them from across the room. If somebody's body mass index is elevated, I'll bet my bottom dollar that their insulin resistance. When the amount of fat on their body is higher to the unhealthy level, and I mean that's above 25, folks, they've got insulin resistance. How much insulin resistance and how long it's going to take them to reverse, well, we can debate on that. Another quick way to measure it is, are they putting that fat on around their middle? So what is their height to waist ratio? A great easy measurement that says you can diagnose insulin resistance. Now, what I think happens to most of the people in our American culture is that they get a lab done. This lab is a very common lab that is called a hemoglobin A1C. This test should have been done in every one of you watching this because it's pretty common and it tells me what's your average blood sugar over the last 100 days. It's based on this structure, which is a red blood cell. A red blood cell does a very vital job in your body. It delivers oxygen. The way it does that is it takes 4 of these globins, they're strings of protein, the globins there in the purple, and they string them together. They then drop in some cups of heme, and that's the yellow little cups. And then we're going to put a tincture of iron in the bottom of that. That is called hemoglobin. So hemoglobin. And the hemoglobin, that little structure, makes a magnetic force where oxygen will suck into those cups. And now those red blood cells can do their job and deliver oxygen to your body. Perfect. Okay. So what about this? Where is it when things go wrong? So meet your enemy, and that is glucose. When a glucose molecule gets too close to that little pocket, it splats on that hemoglobin, and it's like gum on your shoe. It cannot be undone. For the life of that hemoglobin, which is 100 days, that blood sugar has glycated it. It's splatted sugar on the spot. And now when that oxygen goes to bind in that spot, it can't get there. It's blocked by the sugar. When you look at the consequences of that, it means that you're going to deliver less oxygen to your body. And along with the glycation of this hemoglobin, you're glycating a bunch of other things. Because how did that sugar get there? Well, it's a proximity thing. What was the height of the blood sugars hanging out in your blood to do that? So hemoglobin A1C, excellent little tool that we've had around for years that should be used for screening to say how many of those little oxygens have you splatted away and put sugar in the place of. So here we have a glucose that is 5, I think this one's 6 splats. So 6 out of 100 of those oxygens have been glycated. The sugar is stuck there for the life of that red blood cell. And over again, it'll stop by the lungs, it'll then go to your kidneys and stop by the lungs, and then go to your tongue and stop by your lungs and go to your brain. It's delivering oxygen, but 6 out of every 100 seats they cannot be used. Well, this turns out to be on average, a blood sugar of 126. That's not healthy. If you decrease it to 5 out of every seat, now you have an average blood sugar of 97. And although that sounds pretty good, let's take a look at what that really means. When patients come in and say, "Doc, I used to have this A1C in the double digits," and they lower the blood sugar, they lower the blood sugar, they lower the blood sugar, the average comes down, the doctor praises them, and now their average blood sugar is closer to, that healthier part, the 126. And we say, by golly, we can take the word diabetes off your chart. But that doesn't reverse the pathology. When they're coming to me saying, "I want to know, am I healthy? Am I going to live with all brain cells? Am I going to be able to prevent that heart attack?" And this is where we're getting into a much more nuanced level of sugar control, which says, what blood sugar do I want to have? Well, I used to say, and I still say this, I want to have a hemoglobin A1C of less than 5. But I think it's very helpful to see that the average blood sugar, of somebody who has never had diabetes, who has never had insulin resistance, their average blood sugar is 83, which is an A1C of 4.4. Now, I'm not telling you to hop out there and go get an A1C of 4.4. What I'm trying to make the point of is having a high hemoglobin A1C makes it easy for anybody to diagnose this problem. But having a normal A1C does not mean the insulin resistance is cured. That does not mean the pathology isn't still happening. In fact, if you ask me, what do I think is the greatest problem? As that blood sugar went up, as that A1C went up, and now comes back down, what is hidden behind all of the problems is the grime, the goo that's happening in the cells. And there are lab tests that you can measure for inflammation, but I want to know, have you cleaned it all up? Is it all better? Did you make it go away? And I really want to ask the patient, maybe with a lab test, maybe with a biopsy, are you done? Is it gone? Have you cleaned it all up? Have you undone the mess of not getting up for those farm chores in the morning? And you fix the problems at night, not just once, but now you've got a pattern that you're not going to do that again, that your body's not making the problem. And I contend that the most important of understanding whether or not the body still has insulin resistance has to do with a fatty liver. Now, I don't mean that you got a diagnosis and you're on the transplant list. I mean something much different, much more nuanced. Here, I'll show you. So here we have a high insulin state, and we have a beautiful liver. This is a perfect liver. But in the setting of a high insulin state, your liver does what any liver does, and that's to store sugar. It's a parking spot for you to say the fuel that you ate, the carbohydrates that you ate, your body can't use all of them at once. It's going to need to save them to keep a steady supply of sugar, of glucose in the body. And the easiest and fastest parking spot is the liver. So if you eat, and even if you did this, 400 years ago, is that how far it would be before refrigeration? A long time ago, when you didn't have stored processed carbs sitting there, you had, ripe fruit twice a year. The sugar would come into your liver and you would eat more than you could store. What happens when all the parking spots are filled up inside the liver is we say, I got you. I will just compartmentalize that glucose in a better storage molecule called glycogen. But once again, the key to this step is that this liver storage process is still reversible. It was glucose that went into the liver, and it was glucose that comes out of the liver. And as long as that's all the further we get in the disease process, you're going to have no problem reversing your insulin resistance. But that's not most of you. Most of you have had more than a gluttonous meal or excess amount of carbohydrates, and your body said, all right, we used up all the parking spots we have for glucose, and then we used up all the parking spots we have for glycogen. Now we're going to string that sugar together in a way that allows us to store that energy more efficiently. And although it does do that, it stores that energy more efficiently, you cannot get it out in the form of sugar. It will never exit the body in the form of glucose. It now is going to either need to become a ketone or going to become a string of fatty acids that's burned as energy. So here's your liver. This is the last point of no return, because the longer you keep storing fat in that liver, the more gnarly it becomes. And this is, again, at a cellular level, that is what I really care about. Yes, this is what a transplanted, right before transplant, this is what a liver would look like. But it's inside the cells that I would be curious. And I'll tell you, these patients still have pretty normal liver enzymes. They're at the upper edge of normal, but they're not abnormal. And they have several things that keep me saying, well, you've got plenty of glucose circulating around. As you empty the body and empty that liver with a constant form of glucose, well, it's never going to get to the part where it can touch to empty the fatty liver, the strings of fat that you store there. All right, so let's move on to say, I have had many people say, well, can't you just check to see what my insulin is doing? And I like to point out this. This is the way a research team would look at somebody's insulin. And there are patterns of what happens when glucose goes up and your insulin follows it. So this team of researchers uses the advanced study for looking at what insulin should do in the response to glucose. They're using something called an insulin clamp. I'll explain that in a little bit. And so here's somebody healthy. They show up with, let's make sure my color here is pretty. Let's use white here. So here, I want you to notice that blood sugar is below 100. It's 92. The glucose goes up, it comes back down at the 120 mark. And the amount of insulin it took to do that, the dotted line is the insulin it took. That also is not terrible. Now, you could make the argument that it did peak out a little high. And if you're looking at healthy people, I wonder if it should take that much insulin. But let's move on. This is what the study showed. And it says, okay, there were other people with problems. Now we've got a blood sugar that's a little higher. It's reaching that triple digits. And again, the area under the curve for this insulin is higher. The next one is serious pathology. Not only is their blood sugar much higher here over into the 110 sections, but the amount of insulin it's taking to control that is much higher. And when I see this, what I think of first is I can see the fatty liver. I can see the fatty liver everywhere. That every time the area under the curve took more insulin, and this one takes more insulin and more insulin, that's where the fatty liver is coming from. The excess amounts of insulin in all these is what's causing the problem. And you say, well, can't I just check my insulin? That's not going to work out so well. When I look at the average American glucose clearance, like you put glucose in them and you say, all right, what's it take to clear it? Here's a perfect example of average. So I want you to notice that the red is the glucose, and that glucose starts out at 90 at that point. It's still double digits. The insulin is also very low. I mean, I'm going to guess that's about a 10 or an 8. As you put that 75 grams of glucose in, or let's make it more relevant, let's use a meal. They put the meal in. We're going to see the patient's glucose rise to 140 within 30 minutes. And then we hope it's down to about 130 at the 60-minute mark. It goes down to about 110 by the 90-minute. And by 2 hours, it should be back to baseline. Now, this one, again, gets you pretty close. But what's the most important part is, how much insulin did it take to control that? And most average Americans have way too much insulin happening under the curve to control these blood sugars. But just like anything, when you have healthy and you're comparing it to the neighbors around you, you can find people with obesity still saying, but I'm way better than the folks around me. So let's take a closer look. We have 2 examples today that I think do a great job of teaching what is really happening under the hood. What is really happening when that insulin went that high? I'm going to just take a minute to Well, I'll actually do that in just another minute. We're going to talk about this example. Here's a 60-year-old male who comes into the clinic and actually comes to the Pin Chasers. That's the support group that I host every week for free. Pin Chasers stands for the name of a bowling alley here in town, and I rent the birthday room at 8 o'clock on Tuesdays. And it is not fancy, but it is routine and regular, and patients can come ask me questions. But more importantly, people who aren't patients, anybody who wants to have me answer questions can come and see what's it like to be in the community of Tampa Bay and what's it like at 8 o'clock at the Pin Chasers. Well, this guy is great, a wonderful man. He's got kind of a dad bod. He doesn't have a high body mass index. In fact, he thinks he's the healthiest person he knows. Maybe his wife is healthier, but for the most part, he appears healthy. If you were the doctor seeing him for 15 minutes, you would look at him and his blood pressure is fine. His weight isn't that bad. He's had a little family history of problems. In fact, it wasn't until he had a heart attack where somebody checked his A1C and said, well, by golly, that blood sugar is a little high. But back in his chart, he looked about 8 years ago and it was 5.1 or 5.2. It was normal. So I like to say this example of a patient has hidden problems. It's hidden to the patient. It's also hidden to the medical team. Unless you do something super fancy. Okay, so here's this patient, our 60-year-old male with the hidden problems. This is before we put him on a ketogenic diet. And here he's got that blood sugar that's, 90. He's great. Doc says, you're fine. That blood sugar is wonderful. And as he puts in his meal, he eats a meal, and then he has a blood sugar go up to 140, and then it goes up to 170, and it stays up at 170, and maybe it comes down to 160 by the time the 2-hour mark hit. And here's the real problem. What happened behind the scenes was, well, how much insulin did it take to control that? And here is where you get to see the real danger, is that the area under the curve, the amount of insulin it took to control the blood sugar was way too high. Way too high. I like to think when this patient shows up for, the average doctor's appointment, it isn't something you could see. That when you look at that number at the 2-hour mark, at the 3-hour mark, at the 60-minute mark, at the 90-minute mark, and at the 2-hour mark, that's really where the story's told. But who checks that? I mean, there is something called an insulin clamp. But in my 25 years of being an internal medicine doctor, the only place I've ever seen this done is a research team. And what they do is they hook up one IV to drip in blood sugar, and they hook up another IV to drip in insulin. And what they're doing is saying, well, how much insulin does it take to keep that blood sugar stable? And in this patient, to keep it stable, well, it didn't take much before he started making problems. But now the amount of insulin that it keeps if you don't want the blood sugar to rise, you have to keep titrating up the insulin. How much insulin does it take for his cells to listen? And of course, this changes throughout the day. It changes when you break your toe in the middle of the night and don't sleep well. It changes when you're stressed, when you have higher cortisol. It also changes as you age. But this guy the doctor should have known. All of his family has heart disease starting in their late 40s and early 50s. The amount of disease that he's growing is far higher than our other patient. Take a look at this. So we have our female. So one's a boy, one's a girl. The second example, that I'm going to use to teach is a 65-year-old female. I want you to pretend that she's about 75 pounds heavier than she is in that cartoon. But she has inflammation. Her body mass index from across the room, you can see she's fat, she's overweight. She's obese, actually. And everyone in her family is fat. This is not hard for her to see. She kind of has given up that everybody has these problems. When she finally went in to say, I've got a bunch of old lady problems happening, her fasting blood sugar was elevated. And she knew it. She said, oh, it was that way the last 3 or 4 times I went into the doctor, and they said, you should get the blood sugar down. You should get the blood sugar down. And I like to say this woman has obvious problems. Not only is she overweight from across the room, but her blood sugar, there is no doctor in the country that should let that triple-digit fasting blood sugar go uneducated. That the patient should be aware and the doctor should do something about it. So here we have this woman. When she shows up to the clinic, she has a high blood sugar. Hers is 110. And when she puts that meal in, when she eats her meal, the blood sugar shoots up to about 170 right away, up to 180. But if she would just come back at the 2-hour point, it's almost back to baseline. It's almost returned to normal. So if all I was looking at is glucose, I would see the problem actually, but you would see her control the blood sugar pretty well. And this is the amount of insulin it would take to do that. If you compare that to the last patient, it's not. I mean, this is less insulin. The problem with this patient is at the end of the 2 hours, that insulin is high and she's going to keep that insulin high for the rest of the day. If she practically smells food, she's going to make insulin. And the grime of what's happening inside those cells does not get to reverse. She gets the privilege of having it pretty normal when she's fasted. When she hasn't eaten anything for 12 to 16 hours, she comes into the lab and we can see this fasted fasted insulin. But who checks it at 2 hours? So when I look at what insulin does and why it's such a naughty thing for patients to have to struggle with, insulin is something you cannot measure directly. Yes, I can order it, but I'm telling you, do not waste your time. That direct measurement of insulin only deceives the patient into thinking that you're okay. Like if I would have checked it in both of those patients, well, their fasting insulin was fine. That's not the problem. The problem is their insulin is screaming at the cells to take care of this problem, and the cells have stopped listening. And if we're going to reverse this, I need to know, are the cells listening? So let's see if we can show how to reverse this insulin resistance in the 3 steps that I would look at. So yeah, her excess insulin is inflaming her, aging her, and growing the problem of insulin resistance. So here we have our liver. Remember where we were. It's got high insulin, so it's packed full of glucose, it's packed full of glycogen, and it's got those strings of fat in it. But the only thing coming out of the liver, only thing exiting the liver is glucose. And so in order to get the fat out, you have to lower the insulin enough to mobilize the fat. And we know you mobilized fat when you start to produce some ketones. So here's this patient, and we are trying to say, are we improving their health yet? As we lower their insulin, I'm watching to see how well their liver, and this is what I mean by fatty liver, how well that liver is taking the fat and using it as energy. And the way we measure that is by looking for ketones in circulation. So ketones in circulation is step 1. You could have probably guessed that there's 3 real major steps to reversing this insulin resistance. The liver is the central character for this measurement. And as we study what's happening in the liver, I'm going to try to figure out how well is their body listening to insulin. So I'm going to look at glucose, because as glucose goes up, insulin goes up. So what your glucose is today isn't as important as what is your glucose relative to what it's been over the last 5 days? And that tells me if glucose is improved, well, then you're going to produce less insulin. So that reduction in insulin gives me a chance to start healing from insulin resistance. I'll also know that when the insulin drops, you can make ketones. So again, it's not what's your insulin today, it's what is your insulin relative to the last 5 days, last 10 days. And if it's at a steady state for too long, the body says, no, we're not making any of those ketones. You got plenty of glucose to use. And welcome to the puzzle known as insulin resistance. So the Dr. Boz ratio is taking the glucose, taking the big number, and dividing by the little number. Glucose divided by ketones. And yes, it's dirty math, but it's fast and easy and patients can understand it. So as that Dr. Boz ratio jumps from the, above 150 into the 200 range, we know that they have high insulin. What is the exact number of insulin? I don't care. It's high insulin relative to what they've been producing. This is a lot. So as we lower the Dr. Boz ratio, you're lowering the amount of insulin it takes to do the job. And when we get down to normal looking insulin, it's a lot lower than people think. So here's a real-time calculation of, see if I can take those away, of how we measure the Dr. Boz ratio. I think Yeah, as the glucose improves, you start out with the glucose at, say 150, 160, somewhere in this range, but your ketones are at 0. So the answer is infinity. I mean, it doesn't matter. Who cares what the details are? It's so high that you're not improving it. But as you start to lower the glucose and you start to produce ketones, I don't mean one day, I mean that you constantly are making some ketones. This is where there's a tipping point. Where that Dr. Boz ratio dips below 100 are the places that we know the patient's flexibility for using fuels is in constant play. It's flexible. And that is a place where I'm starting to measure. I wonder how often they do that. I wonder how in shape the cell is to give me glucose versus ketones. And as I look at the people who have normalized their insulin, that their Dr. Boz ratios are in the 40s, which will sound bizarre to anybody first coming to this scene. Like, how is it possible? I had to fast for 5 days to get my Dr. Boz ratio low. Well, that's a sign that insulin is chronically high and your cells have been under the intense influence of insulin for a very long time. In fact, I would say that you've got this this setting where your scenario for doing farm chores is I want to have maybe the first day you want to play with the animals and you want to say, oh, they're cute and they're babies, but about the 10th time you've done this chore, you're like, no, I don't want you breaking my fence. I don't want you pushing down my partitions. I don't want you biting the nipple off of my milk bottle for the others. And I don't want you stealing the milk of your neighbor. I want you to behave. I want these little calves to behave. But I know if I don't put in the routine and set up my life that I can get up for that morning alarm to go get the chore done before school, well, there's going to be problems because I'll try to do a good job when I get home from school and I'll try to do it right, but it's so much more work. And I know I don't have to. Like, okay, I'll just do better tomorrow. And the chronic nature of reversing that farm chore routine into something that is sustainable, that's something you can, get to the adulthood of that calf. Well, it has more to do than just the alarm. It has to do with the process and the amount of structured milestones for saying, okay, we are getting reversal of the chaos behind the chores. We are getting reversal of the insulin resistance. So let me show you the first step. So step 1 of 3 to reverse insulin resistance. I bet you guys could guess it. You must have ketones in production. You must produce ketones. When I get folks showing up to this, both of these folks showed up this way. I showed up this way when I had first came to the ketogenic diet, and they're eating multiple times a day. The height of how high their blood sugars go, somewhere in the 150s or 60s, is not uncommon after a meal. To keep that blood sugar under 140 is a rare find in the wild. Only when I'm looking at, well, what are they doing at night? If I really want to know what's going on in their life, I'm going to look at the metabolism when they're sleeping, when their mouth isn't chewing food. And I want to know how well do they push the reset button from this last bite of food until the morning cortisol rise. So they come in, this is what it looks like. We put them on a ketogenic diet and we say, all right, now that blood sugar has come down a little. We've taken the peaks from up here, and we've pushed it down a little. So, and again, they're still eating multiple times a day. We don't really work on that. But what happens is that relative change. That reduction in carbohydrates decreased the insulin. The blood sugar decreased and the insulin decreased. And now ketones were able to be produced. They started to mobilize some of that stored fat in the liver, and they feel pretty good. And this goes on for a patient like our 60-year-old male, where he shows up, here was his blood sugar, here was how high the insulin was under the curve. And when you added his ketones, they were flatlined. There was no such thing. They didn't have any ketones in circulation. And his body has been in that status of no ketones for years. When we put him on the ketogenic diet, his blood sugars stayed under 140 when he's eating on a ketogenic diet. So it would start out at about 80, stay under 140. And by the time the 2-hour mark was there, he wasn't back down to his baseline, which would have been the healthiest, but he was making ketones. So if you look at that ketone production, it's above 1 in the morning when he's been sleeping all night long. This is a really good sign that his system is working out his metabolism while sleeping, which is what all of us are supposed to be doing. But welcome to what's normal. No, that's not normal in most of us. He even eats, and the ketones don't drop much because he's got many, many, many mitochondria, not only producing those ketones, but demanding them for energy. So his Dr. Bow's ratio goes up above 100 because the glucose went up. And now he does drop his glucose or ketones. It does, I think, get all the way down to 0 before he gets to the end of the 2 hours. And the good news is his ketones show that when he goes without food for a while, he makes good ketones. But now that he's eaten, those ketones are going to stay low probably the rest of the day. He has enough insulin produced here. This insulin's so high that it's going to suppress any ketones for the rest of the day. So he really only got to repair that grime, that problem, while he was sleeping. But he's doing a lot of things right. He's 2 months in, he's lost weight, and he feels wonderful. Let's take our girl. So this is the woman who shows up overweight, and everybody in her family is overweight. And she finally says, I'm taking life by the reins. I'm going to fix this problem. And she starts out with that blood sugar really high. Her ketones are also 0. There's none, and hasn't been for years. But a couple months into keto, and she has a glucose that's in the double digits. She's lowered it enough to have a glucose production in the double digits. This has also reduced enough of her insulin that she's making ketones. But as soon as she eats, the glucose doesn't rise too much. I mean, she has really good control of her glucose, but the ketones go to 0 and they stay at 0. And just like I was saying, look at that Dr. Bell's ratio. It's just, there's no production of ketones. So as you look at what this insulin was taking in the background, even on a ketogenic diet, it's going to be an excessive amount of insulin. And I can tell that because her Dr. Bell's ratio at the 2 hour mark, 90-minute mark, all are too high. But the best part is she is dropping that hemoglobin A1C. And so was our other patient. So step 2 is they make ketones for step 1, but step 2 is they normalize that hemoglobin A1C. Let's take a closer look at that. So this is what he looks like when he's healthy. He's got less inflammation going on. They do feel great. And as they enter into this phase where the blood sugars still go higher than I'd like them to be, but he's got lower ketones, I'll push them to say, I need you to change the number of times you eat in a day. And by golly, 2 times of eating a day will raise that ketone because it's less stimulation of insulin. It's honestly not a lot. I wish, especially in that female, the amount of insulin she makes every time she eats, that this meal causes her enough insulin to last the whole day. If she didn't eat this meal, she would repair a lot faster. But it's just too much to ask somebody in the first part of this journey to say, I want you to eat once in the morning and then not at all the rest of the day. There's easier ways to stay the course, meaning there's easier ways to get these farm chore processes into something that's manageable. Here's what happens to their ketones over the course of probably 4 to 5 weeks at 2 eatings a day. And the reason that reverses so quickly is because the problem of high insulin is still happening to them. They are still making too much insulin. We slide those meals together and then we shoot that eating window towards sunrise. And when we do that, we do get an improvement in the amount of ketones produced. So I specifically want you to keep your eye on this season for here's where they stopped eating, and here's what's happening with the amount of the insulin has to be less at that point because it's producing that ketones in the morning. So here's the Dr. Bow's ratio. They wake up in the morning. It's 2 digits. That's really good. That's really good. And we're reversing problems. But as soon as they start to eat, the insulin wins. They make way too much of it in order to reverse the process. Now, when we check them in the middle of the night, like at 2 in the morning, their ketones are high again and their glucose is low. But who does that? Not too many people. And so we've got, let's just make sure you understand what we've got happening for most of the patients. When they come in to see me and they're so happy, they say, Doc, my hemoglobin A1C is normal. I've never seen it in the 5s. They have good energy. Their brain is working again. Their bodies are working again. Some of those old lady problems have been reversed. And they want to know, am I there yet? Am I done? And the answer is no, they're not. They're not. Step 3, so we've done step 1, step 2. Step 3 in this process is something that I almost didn't put in the slides because it's so cliche. In fact, I really hate seeing even my own videos out there which talk about hormone balancing. I'm like, oh, good Lord. The way hormone balancing has turned into like a marketing glib, it's deceitful for the patients. When you look at what I'm talking about when I say, all right, if you want to reverse the final step of this, it is to balance hormones. But you need to know that a cell in your body at any given time is being influenced by about 40 hormones. By definition, a hormone goes to the cell and tells the cell what to do. So it's got 40 people telling it what to do. But there's one master hormone that outrules any other hormone, and that's insulin. So if you skip to step 3 and go to your doc and say, hey, I need some sex hormones, I need testosterone, I need estrogen, and you didn't fix the first 2 steps, you don't have ketones in circulation, you haven't got that hemoglobin A1C to normal, and you start mucking around with, can I add some hormones and improve the situation? The answer is like, you're wasting your money, you're wasting your time, you're traveling around the sun and aging faster and further, and you're not cleaning up the processes to actually reverse the disease. You have to start with those first 2 things. They have to produce ketones. They have to normalize that hemoglobin A1C. Don't look too far ahead when it comes to what are the next steps for reversing it. So here's our guy, step 3. And here he was with his hidden problems, keeping in mind the first step before he went keto was his blood sugar was fine, not bad at all, but his ketones were flatlined, and the amount of sugar that he produced at the 60, 90, and 120 way too high for healthy people. This is why this man has more disease than the female example. He has so much debris built up in his system that he's gonna have a heck of a time emptying it all. So here's what happens when he went keto. And I don't know if that last slide was correct. This is 1 year ago. He'd been keto for, I don't know, half dozen months. And he made good ketones until he ate. And then the ketones went to 0. And then once they were at 0, the rest of the day, he didn't make very good ketones. It's not something where we could say magically it's better, but now that we have manipulated some of the hormones, dang, look what happens to him. I mean, I just think this is impressive. His blood sugars were in the 70s, so it's off the chart here, actually. And then when he eats at the 30-minute mark, I mean, the blood sugar doesn't make it to 100. That's how little his blood sugars are moving because we took care of some of those hormones. And when I look at the ketone production, his ketone production hardly fell at the 30-minute mark. And it did not go to that danger zone of none over the 2 hours. And this is the dramatic difference between what happens at step 2 to step 3. Now he comes to keto group nearly every week and is an incredible vessel for teaching me how nasty that disease is. Because even in the midst of all this, he's had another heart attack and a stroke. Not because of what's happening today in his cell, but because of how much the cost of that grime that's been around forever has cost him. So here's our gal. She also has, again, the fasting blood sugar is really high. She goes on a ketogenic diet, drops the blood sugar, and starts making ketones. But again, quickly, the insulin resistance wins, and she stops making ketones. So we work with her hormones and work with her situation. And now, in the morning, let's do the math here. Her blood sugar is 80, and her ketones are 2.0. So that is a Dr. Bow's ratio of 40 there. By the end of the 2 hours, she still has a Dr. Bow's ratio of 1, and she has a blood sugar of 100. So she still has a Dr. Bow's ratio of 100 there. That is powerful, and especially when you can see that she doesn't just do it one day. This is the constant return of that to her system. And when I look at, actually, I'm going to fast forward this to when I look at some of the things when patients ask me, how well do I think my insulin resistance has gone? Many of you saw me on the advent of this or really early into the story of a ketogenic diet where I said, hey, guess what happens when I think I was probably 42-year-old woman who's had 3 kids and, the 50 pounds that you really, or maybe it's 30, whatever, too many pounds of fat that should have been off, didn't go off. And then I go on a ketogenic diet and I drop some weight and boy, I do feel better. And the swelling in my ankles is, that I point out to all my patients, boy, I don't have that anymore. And I feel so good and my brain's on fire. Wow, I write a book. I write a couple of books. And yet every time I go to check my insulin resistance, my Dr. Boz ratio over the course of 2 hours, it's terrible. And I keep trying to do things. So then I start to say, well, what is it about could I ever reverse my insulin resistance? So hang in there. I'll tell you the answer here. We're going to do one last thing. People who reverse their insulin resistance, number 1, they make ketones. Number 2, they normalize their A1C. And number 3, they balance their hormones. Said another way, people who reverse insulin resistance measure. Glucose and ketones don't just say, oh, I can tell I'm in ketosis because of my breath. No. Okay, yes, you might be able to tell that. What I want to know is, what is it relative to your glucose? And how often can you hit that? And more specifically, one of the major things that I know is hard for patients to hear is, I don't care what your glucose and ketones are in the afternoon as much as I care what they are first thing in the morning. I want to know what your metabolism did when you were resting, because there's less messiness in it. There's less noise in what's happening with your insulin resistance. And when I look at that liver cell, that thing where at the beginning I'm like, what does it take for me to see? Well, that's the clue where I'm going to know, is the insulin resistance gone? Hang in there. Here we go. So that insulin resistance, they measure. Number 2, they are in community. They do hard things like those chores of getting up. I mean, it was hard for me to get up and, to that alarm before school, but it wasn't so hard that I couldn't do it because I was in a family that did that. I had a brother that did it too. And, he might've gone through those teenage years where 5 alarms in the house couldn't wake him up. But he was in a culture that said, no, you wake up for the alarm eventually, you figure it out. Doing hard things isn't because I did great at it the first time. I was in a community of people doing hard things. And they showed me how to forgive myself. They showed me how to do a good job of what happens when blood sugars, or when you fail, when you have to do the 3 times the work at the end of the day. And when I look at the community that comes to that pin chasers, both of the cases from today are there, and their stories over time aren't perfect. They have failed. They have failed again. When I look at the ways that I reversed insulin, where I think I reversed insulin resistance, and I know they've reversed insulin resistance, over the last year, I have lost another probably 15 to 20 pounds. And although some of it is not the healthiest moment, I had some stress of a hurricane that took away my kitchen. It was also during a time where perimenopause had definitely come into my life. And despite doing what I do to teach people how to go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, that reversal only really happened when I fixed the estrogen. I had a reversed hemoglobin A1C. I produced ketones, but I didn't get to the final, what I think of the best version of my health, which has probably happened in the last 3 months, until this last season. It did take hormones that changed that discussion. But this brings me to the message that I know we are 50 minutes into this lecture, and I want my viewers who are here to know that I've taught lots of patients how to reverse insulin resistance. And I've known this sequence of improvement because I do look deeply into the patients who join me twice a year for the class that I teach. Now, I not only teach it, I live it. So here I am twice a year doing the most, I think, the most important class that's online. That's and I'll tell you that. Hold on one second. I gotta go here and push this button over here. That we have a reward for folks that are here today. We have a special link that's in the show notes. If you've never taken this class and you say, "Dang doc, I want I want to reverse insulin resistance. I want to do this. And we know it's hard. Even if you have never done a ketogenic diet, or you did a ketogenic diet, but your ketones went to pot and they never were resurrected, or you haven't got that hemoglobin A1C back down to normal, I'll tell you, the way I did it, the way these patients did it, is they attended the 21-day metabolic kick, this 3-week class. And I know based on my attraction, my positive, the online comments, the number of people writing in emails, the number of people buying books, that my popularity has never been as high as it's been over the last probably 5 months. And every year I sell out. I only do this for 200 students, and it's not on sale yet. The cart doesn't open for 2 weeks. And I am giving the people who stay in this long YouTube lecture a special link that's in the show notes. We'll also put it in the chat, that you can get into the class first, and there is a $250 discount. Now, in the past, we've offered a much steeper discount, and although we would love to do that again, we have a ton of people that have written in saying, as soon as it's on sale, I want a seat. And so we know that the demand is really high. And I wish I could offer a higher discount, but I can't at this point. And I want those of you that come to the Tuesday Lives, part of my community is a Tuesday Lives, I want you to have the discount that I can't offer you. I have a sneaking suspicion that there's only going to be maybe a couple of emails that go out to our email campaign for the full price of the $2,000, and that you guys get about $250 off of that. Let me tell you what else happens. And this is something that I haven't put in the email campaign, but I want folks to know. And that's that final section of hormones at the end, where they have to have a hormonal balance. That many of you know that the last class, I offered a one-time prescription for tirzepatide, which is that GLP-1 hormone that is a very critical tool that can be abused. But I wanted to see, what would it do to the patients who have struggled? Like the 2 patients that are in those examples, what happened to the final hormonal level? What got them to be that massive ketone improvement and that reduction in blood sugar? They took tirzepatide. Microdosing of it, and they did it after being on an advanced ketogenic state, after reducing those A1Cs, and watching how a tiny amount of that drug changed their life forever. Like, no kidding, I thought the male in this story was going to die. He had so much disease pathology, and he was struggling. He would do well on the ketogenic diet for a while, and then he'd have birthday cake or a waffle or some dang thing. And now, even though he was coming to group, even though he had his A1C improved, but with the microdosing of that, he learned that his improvement in a ketogenic diet and the persistence of staying the course, I mean, it's giving him a new chapter on life. And I feel privileged to know him, that he's not dead, that he's not in the grave. The same thing goes for the female, where she had tried many ways to get that to improve. And she doesn't have 5 decades to do this, to reverse it. Her life expectancy isn't that long. So to give her the final step that really did reverse it was this microdosing of a GLP-1. Now, I don't want to be a GLP-1 mill. I don't want to be the kind of doctor where you come in and say, hey, give me a prescription and off you go. There's plenty of people that do that. And if you want that, go for it. I contend that you're not helping the metabolism. You're not cleaning, you're doing the chores wrong again. You are pushing and stealing from the maintenance that needs to happen, that needs to be undone. And oh my gosh, do we do a great job of that in that 21-day class. It is the thing I will do until I die. I love it. It is the best 3 weeks of the year, where I get to, it's almost like taking students on grand rounds and showing them in a classroom, what does it look like to have a group of people who are committed, who are yours at the end of the course. We don't have nothing to do with it. We show you how to be in a Zoom group together with these educated people. And now we are offering at the end of the class, anybody that was one of those 200 students, we will show you 12 weeks of chaperone GLP-1 microdosing if you choose, if you want that. Many will not need it, but those who want it, we don't want to become your primary care forever. We want to say, watch what happens when we do this. And at the end of the class, there is a referral letter us to your primary care physician saying, here's what happened to your patient, not only when they went on a strict ketogenic diet, not only when they learned how to do a sardine fast, and even a water fast if it's safe for you, but look what happened when we added the microscopic dosing of GLP-1s after they did that. And I feel that it is my calling, that God has given me this gift to teach and to enjoy teaching, and then to steward patients through this season of reversing metabolic disease. But more importantly, gifting that referral or that education back to their primary care so that more physicians are seeing what we do in that clinic, not because they're reading a paper or coming to see me on stage or watching one of my YouTube videos, but they're seeing the transformation of the numbers and the medications and the reversal of metabolic diseases because they were under our care for the 21-day and watching what that 12-week experiment can do for them. So this is a really important message to me. I'm doing this 2 weeks before I open the cart, launch the cart. You won't be able to go to the website and get in. You must use the link. It's a what you call hidden link, where I'm trying to gift it to the people who show up for the Tuesday lives, who support me in the process of not only showing up, but asking good questions and again, joining us in how we reverse metabolic problems. All right, it is late, but we are going to answer some of these questions. So Dolores says, for seniors who may have been insulin resistant for decades, how do they know if the reversed insulin resistance? Can they eat low carb and then do they stay on that forever? So this is that final moment where I might not have connected the dots. So thanks for that question. So how do I know if those 3 patients are insulin resistant reversal? The question is how quickly their body goes from, you remember that video, that slide where the glucose is coming out? I want to know how quickly they can go from glucose coming out to ketones coming out, glucose coming out to ketones coming out. And it's not 100%. You have, a mosaic of whether or not your cell, in fact, your mitochondria, are producing ketones or not producing ketones. And that liver production of what's coming out of the liver, how much glucose is present, how much ketones are present, it gives me a snapshot. But the most critical thing, the way I know that I've reversed insulin resistance, is I can flip back and forth into a ketogenic state and a non-ketogenic. I mean, the glucose go up and down, the ketones go up and down really fast, fantastically. In fact, it's almost a testimony that I broke my toe last night. I have a lot of pain in my foot, and I didn't sleep great, but my glucose was only 70. Had you done that to me 4 years ago, or even 2 years ago, before I really went through this perimenopausal thing, I would have said, no, my sugar is high because my cortisol is high. And I would have blown it off saying, it's just not fixable. It's just not fixable. There are many times where I've said, you can't reverse insulin resistance unless you follow these numbers, unless you are really looking at what that liver does at a microscopic level. All right, let's keep going here. I'm going to go over to the chat so that you guys can see what other folks are saying as I'm reading these too. Oh, wait, I can't do that. I got to go this way. All right, Jarrett says, should you stop fasting at the Dr. Bell's ratio less than 40, even if only 24 hours? No. So here's the deal. Just like with any of your blood sugars or ketones, the numbers are fluctuating. If you feel good at 24 hours, great. I think you don't use the word fasting until you get to 36 hours. Why do I say that? Because I've seen a lot of patients. I've seen a lot of patients who do not reverse their insulin resistance, but they put in a lot of hard work. They are going to the chores after school and they are doing a lot of work, but they are not getting ahead. It is just, you're doing it wrong. You are doing it wrong. And the reversal of the process isn't to be on a GLP-1 for the rest of their life. It is to see ketones for the rest of your life. You're made that way. And you won't know that until you get some of that grime gone away, some of that insulin to come down, and some of the debris moved out of the way so that your liver cells can function and flex between glucose and ketones depending on the day. So if you get to the 24-hour mark, most people, that's not first thing in the morning. They are at the 24-hour mark in the afternoon. I don't care. I want to know what the morning fasting glucose is, the morning fasting ketones are. So the mistake I see people do is, you can manipulate your ketones and glucose once you get the hang of this. Go for a walk, go out in the Florida August or July heat, break a sweat. You can see you burn some fuel and the ketones will go up a little bit and the glucose will go down. Okay, but that's during the day. There's all kinds of things influencing it. I want to know What is it first thing in the morning? What was it doing at 2 o'clock in the morning when you were sleeping? And were you cleaning up the grime? Were you fixing this metabolic problem while you sleep? And therein lies the issue of how long it takes to reverse insulin resistance. And it's not as much time as it is people get stalled and they think they're doing okay when they're really just doing all of the chores after school in the hardest, most impossible way. All right, Proud American Mom, what a great name. I end my fast by 3 o'clock and not eat again until 10 to 12 the next day. I take BHB at night and metformin, but my glucose is still 130 to 150 the next morning. What should I do? Yeah, you're okay. So there are a couple things that could be going on with Proud American Mom there. First of all, her blood sugars at 130 to 150 in the morning are making debris. They're making debris. I would be asking your doctor to help get those sugars down with a medication, unless you can take, you've got a pretty good eating. I end my eating by 3 and then don't eat again until 10 to 12 the next day. First of all, I'd push you for a sardine fast. I'd do a 3-day sardine fast and see what happens to your glucose and ketones. If the glucose never drops into the double digits, you need to see your doctor. This is not medical advice. I'm just educating through your example. I am serious. You should see your doctor. But it's a typical problem. She's got severe advanced insulin resistance. And the reversal process is she's trying to do what a healthy set of cells should respond to, but something's wrong. She's either more advanced than she thinks she is, or her body's no longer making as much insulin as she thinks she is. All right, CA Virka, I know you. What are the biomarkers that best define insulin sensitivity? Is it just keeping A1C under 5? A1C under 5 is a great one to begin with, but I'll tell you, I have some people who are really good when I look at their continuous glucose monitors. So when I said, what's the best metric? Yeah, the area under the average, which is your A1C blood sugar, is good, and under 5 is amazing. But I've seen some people who I think are insulin sensitive and their A1Cs are 5.1 or 5.2. It's from years of problems. So either their red blood cells don't last as long. And what I'm saying is A1C can deceive you. Don't use that. Once you get it to normal, I would love to hear a 4.8. That does give me even higher confidence. I want to know what's their blood sugar doing when they sleep. That's a really good one. And if their blood sugar is drifting up through the night, like especially into the 90s or above 100, that's a metabolic sign that you still have a lot of glucose to burn through. I love to see the ketones present in the morning when they wake up. Again, it's fasted, you're sleeping. So how quickly could you turn on the ketone lever while you stopped eating? And if it takes you 2 days, like the last patient, I bet it would take her 2 to 3 days to get the ketones up and the glucose down, based on just the gestalt of that profile. In a healthier person, somebody who's doing better, I'm looking at a uric acid that's under 5, meaning the storage of their sugar has the debris. Stored sugar turns into uric acid. Glucose turns into fructose, and fructose turns into uric acid. And even a glucose of 105 is making fructose and turning it into uric acid in my chronic insulin resistant patients. So how do I measure that? Uric acid. So get that uric acid into the 4.8, 4.5 range. I love seeing that. Again, that A1C like it is. That fasting sugar or the middle of the night sugar is another wonderful way to do that. Other things you look for are the chronic inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein, and even like homocysteine is a tricky one. If they've had elevated inflammatory markers for a long time, their homocysteine will be above 15 or maybe even above, I love it, less than 10. So those markers all give me a clue that they're going in the right direction, and that if they've arrived, all of them are great. Like their homocysteine is 8, their uric acid is 4.5, their hemoglobin A1C is 4.8, their middle of the night blood sugar is 70. And those are healthy numbers. But if you look around, your support group, you may say, nobody gets that. That can't be normal. But it is. All right, so Sue B says, when consuming your ketone, is there a time when it shouldn't be consumed? Healthy 60-year-old female trying to biohack life, fasting, sauna, keto, carnivore. Oh, nice job. So ketones do give you energy. So I think having them at bedtime can be a little disruptive to the sleep cycle. I had a couple more stories today in the 21 day, just looking at a couple folks that had stalled, saying, how do I go to the next level? How do I get out of this rut? I don't want to hang out here forever. And just said, put ketones in twice a day, put ketones in twice a day, morning and noon, give you the churn. Again, what you're trying to do is signal the liver to make more ketones. We had a gentleman today who got a little hypoglycemic. So he's trying to keep up with the Joneses, keep up with the cool kids that are doing keto. And he got hypoglycemic, and he's an elder. So we took care of the situation, but as I called and followed up with him later on in the day, I said, one of the key things when you switch from, a glucose-driven menu to a ketone production is how quick can you flip? And this gentleman had not been keto for long, and he's probably in his 70s, late 70s. And so because his body couldn't reach for glucose, or couldn't, use a ketone as fast as his brain needed to, he got hypoglycemic. You can prevent that when using these salts, especially if you routinely do it. And what's happening on the inside is you're producing more ketones every time you consume ketones. Ketones in circulation stimulate your liver to make ketones. So the danger for him was actually not using them. He was really trying to stay the course, and he does have a lot of things that will get better if he could stay in a ketogenic state. But I think he hadn't eaten in 24 hours, and then he's come into a keto support group, and it was maybe a little intense, or whatever, a little stressful, and the blood sugar dropped. And you say, okay, there's not really a bad time to take supplements, but there are better times. Like if you're transitioning, if you're trying to say, that word is terrible to use these days, if you're trying to make your mitochondria better, more efficient at using a ketone, he should have been adding ketones twice a day for the last couple of weeks, and he would have been able to get through that 24 hours, no problem. Not because of my supplement. Well, my supplement would have taught his liver cells how to make ketones better, and his body would have had a baseline level of ketones. He had the blood sugar go down without the ketone supplement. So it's kind of the backwards of answering that question, Sue. But good job on doing that, on all the levers you're pulling for your metabolism. Okay, Christmas MC, what's the lowest level of ketones do you need to produce? You need to produce to start to empty the liver of glycogen, and at that minimum level, how long will it take to empty it? Yeah, so you can think of glycogen emptying of the liver as how long do you need to fast. Let's just start that. Let's take normal people. How long do you need to fast to empty the glycogen storage in your liver? And I would tell you, go get a continuous glucose monitor. If you need one, go to bozmd.com and do Dr. Boz favorites. There's a way to get a continuous glucose monitor. In fact, I was going to put my meter in, my continuous glucose meter in again tonight, because what I've learned about me is what I want you to learn about you. If you don't have a snitch of food, what is your blood sugar at 72 hours? Or let's start at 36 hours. And if at 36 hours, your blood sugar's still in the 90s, maybe even the 80s, you're not an empty liver. An empty liver is a blood sugar around 65. Now, just like that guy at group this morning who got hypoglycemic, I don't have to know what his blood sugar is. It was too low for his brain to handle that. His body was used to a higher blood sugar, and he dropped below that without producing the ketones. So what your question is at Christmas is the lowest level of ketones you need to produce to start to empty the liver of glycogen. It starts to turn on somewhere about 0.5, 0.6, that you can start to see, all right, you're dropping insulin and you're continuing to mobilize glucose. When I look at how quickly my body can drop to a glucose of 65, it's probably within about 30 hours of not eating. And I get in that 65, 70, maybe 48 hours. But it'll flatline at 65. My ketones will continue to prime the pump. I'll supply my body with ketone fuel throughout that time. But that's a human thing, that dropping that blood sugar into that 65 range is what happens when you get to gluconeogenesis. And this is not my opinion. This happens in everybody. The danger is if you're not healthy enough to supplement that fuel with ketones, you're going to have happen what happened to that guy today, which is he got lightheaded and had to sit down. The supply of ketones is the key for that transition. And reversing insulin resistance. I mean, reversing insulin resistance means the liver's empty and it's staying empty, meaning it's not getting more fat in it. I think there's quite the paradigm where you're asking people to eat fat so that they can empty the fat in their liver. But the key is the liver fat is trapped behind a wall of excess insulin. Adding fat in your diet, a ketogenic diet, allows you to consume calories and deliver fat to those mitochondria and make some ketones. It's like the first step of, you can't mobilize the fat in your liver because the glucose is high because the ketones are high. So the glucose goes down and the insulin goes down, and the mobilization of the fuel called fat only happens when you've notched the ketones up and the glucose down. So let's just try to answer that question again. 0.5 is the minimum level where you know it's a nutritional ketosis, but you're going to wait what you really need to have is a stable, decreased amount of glucose production. And I mean, I would prime the pump. I would put ketones in circulation if you're not able to get to that 36 or 48 hour fast or a sardine fast. All of those would give you the answers. These are the kind of things that when I'm in the 21 day, I'm able to answer them much more thoroughly because I can learn about the patient a little better. Will the liver make ketones from liver fat before using the fat? Oh, this is a great one. So the liver fat, let me just show you this on the example here. It's a great question, and I think people get trapped by it all the time. So I'm going to start this one and go back over to my little slide. So here's this fatty liver, right? And you have high insulin. And the question is, well, how do I use that fat? I don't want to eat fat. I want to use that fat. But every time you saw those patients eat, their insulin would go higher. Their body would make more insulin. Now, that is the least amount of insulin stimulation or insulin production happens when you eat fat. And when they eat fat, as long as they've got less of the glycogen. Let's see if I can do it in blue. Less of the glycogen. Oh, come on, one more time. Maybe it's not going to work. Okay, whatever. Less of the glycogen, less of the sugars. The production of ketones starts to circulate when all those glycogen are empty. So the glucose still is emptying. Those strings of fat turned into ketones, the first strings were from the fat you ate. Most of the time, you're not going to donate fat cells from your liver to the circulating ketones until the insulin has come down, until the glucose has come down. I mean, it is a catch-22. But the only way we get a liver that is pristine and not filled with fat was to first empty the glucose, empty the glycogen, and then in the meantime, get as many of those ketones in production as possible. The only supply of fat turning into ketones is the ones you swallow at the beginning. And although that changes with time, I am amazed at how many times I tell patients, just give me 3 days of sardines and watch what your body does. And they'll come back saying, I can't believe my ketones were 3.5. I'm like, yeah, the fat you gave your liver primed the production of the ketones from your liver. And now your liver can use the fat. But you have to start with eating the fat, especially in severe insulin resistance. All right, let's go here and go questions. There we go. Great question, though. Last one, Dave says, is 5 months still too soon to expect consistent double-digit ketones? Yeah, I'll tell you, if you're severely insulin resistant, 5 months, it's just how often are you pulling one of the levers that stimulate metabolism? Like you saw up here on Sue's question where she says, I'm using fasting, sauna, and then I'm keto carnivore, meaning very low carbohydrates per day. So she's using 3 major tools to get fuel burned in a ketogenic way. Instead of, so she's fasting, so, not putting any food in for at least 36 to 48 hours. She's putting her body under heat, which is sauna, so she's sweating. And then when she does eat, the amount of carbs is really low. So when you say 5 months, is it too soon? It depends on how many levers you're pulling. You should be able to see significant reversal by this point. All right, so let's see. Last one is, should I wait until cooler weather before ordering the Keto Mojo glucose ketone glucose strips. Not sure if the heat will make. Now, they're not less reliable. I will tell you, for the final one still around at the hour and 15-minute show, I don't have any problem with the Keto Mojo coming in the mail through the heat. But if you did order one of my raspberry BHBs off of Amazon, I will tell you that it's hard. There's nothing I can do about it. I've got a new batch coming. It is safe to use. It just is unfortunate that happened to us. We are the highest ketone content in that BHB tub. I usually have one sitting near me here, but I don't right now. So if you ordered that and the heat got you, I would just ask please don't send it back. Please use it. You just need to crush it up. It's not harmful. We've had it safety tested. It is fine, but the chances you're going to get any more BHB is pretty low because I'm waiting for another supply because of what happened. There is a chance that we're going to have a fire sale with some hard BHB, and we do know that there is a huge shift in where I'm spending money in my business. I've been putting a lot of money into advertising on Amazon and on Google, and I'm going to pull back on that. Try to not increase the prices as much as I was going to increase prices, and just cut back on advertising. That means I'm just really hoping you will continue to help me, give me great reviews if you think I deserve them on Amazon. When you cut back on the budgeting, they really punish you. So we're in that zone of the chapter of our business. So I appreciate you guys. I really hope to see many of you in the 21 day. I will do this same announcement at the end of next week. And then after that, the pre-sale or the discounted sale will be off. And then we'll be in the regular campaign of selling the 21 day. With only taking 200 of you and the high number of folks that tune in every week, I'm pretty sure we'll sell out, which would be a blessing. We will see you guys next week. Thanks for staying till the end.